crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the private dining room as I stood there in my navy blazer, watching my family and colleagues mingle around elegant tables. At 32, I had just been promoted to senior marketing director at Thompson and Associates, and tonight was supposed to be my moment. My parents sat at the head table and my younger brother David slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone. When Dad stood up with his wine glass, I felt my heart flutter with anticipation. This was it. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will make you think twice about family dynamics. Trust me, you are going to want to stick around for this one because what my father said next changed everything between us forever. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I learned early that love in our household came with conditions. My father, Robert, worked as a construction supervisor, his hands permanently stained with dirt and calluses, while my mother, Linda, taught third grade at the local elementary school. They were hardworking middle-class people who believed in traditional values and gender roles that seemed carved in stone. David, 3 years my junior, was the golden child from the moment he took his first breath. Where I had to prove myself constantly, David simply existed and received praise. When he wanted expensive football equipment in high school, Dad would drive across town to find the best deals. When I needed supplies for my advanced placement classes, I heard lectures about responsibility and earned the money myself through weekend jobs at the local diner. My academic achievements were acknowledged with a brief, "good for you," before conversations inevitably shifted to David's athletic potential or social popularity. When I graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, Dad shook my hand once and said it was nice that I was so focused on books. But when David barely scraped by and enrolled in community college, Dad threw a backyard barbecue and invited the entire neighborhood to celebrate his son's practical approach to education. The pattern continued through college. I worked multiple jobs to cover expenses my scholarship did not include, sleeping 4 hours a night between studying and earning rent money. David lived comfortably at home, his part-time retail job funding weekend parties, while Mom packed his lunches and Dad covered his car insurance. During family dinners, my Dean's List achievements warranted polite nods, but David's stories about intramural sports or workplace friendships sparked animated discussions that lasted hours. After graduation, I started at the bottom of the corporate ladder, as a junior marketing coordinator, determined to prove that success came through dedication rather than favoritism. 18-hour days became my normal routine. I moved through 3 different companies, climbing from coordinator to specialist to manager, each promotion earned through overtime projects and strategic thinking that impressed supervisors and clients alike. David, meanwhile, drifted between jobs, never quite finding his passion, but always confident that the right opportunity would eventually present itself. During family gatherings, Dad would defend David's employment gaps as taking time to find the perfect fit, while describing my career progress as getting lucky with corporate politics. When I finally landed my dream position at Thompson and Associates, a Fortune 500 company, I felt like I had finally reached a place where my efforts would speak for themselves. The work was demanding but fulfilling. I managed complex campaigns worth millions of dollars, led teams through challenging projects, and consistently exceeded performance targets that more experienced colleagues struggled to meet. My recent promotion to senior marketing director came with a 6-figure salary and responsibility for 15 team members. I would be the youngest person in company history to reach this level, and I knew my family would finally see that my success was not accidental or handed to me through some mysterious corporate favoritism. Planning the celebration party felt like planning my own validation ceremony. I chose Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, and booked their private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The menu featured dishes I had only dreamed of affording during my struggling years, and I selected premium wines that cost more than my first monthly salary. The guest list included my immediate family, close colleagues who had supported my climb, and Sarah, my mentor, who had guided me through the corporate maze with wisdom and encouragement. I wanted this evening to be perfect, sophisticated, and memorable for all the right reasons. I arrived an hour early to ensure everything was arranged properly. The flowers I had ordered created elegant centerpieces, and soft jazz music filled the space with warmth. My outfit had been chosen carefully. The navy blazer conveyed authority, while the statement necklace I had bought to celebrate added a touch of personal style that felt authentically me. When my parents arrived, Dad looked uncomfortable in the upscale setting. He kept glancing around nervously, as if the polished silverware and cloth napkins were somehow accusatory. Mom seemed more at ease, but I noticed her watching Dad's reactions carefully, ready to smooth over any social awkwardness that might arise. David showed up 20 minutes late wearing jeans and a wrinkled polo shirt, immediately complaining that the restaurant was too fancy and asking if they served normal food like burgers. His casual dismissal of the elegant atmosphere I had worked so hard to create felt like the first small crack in what I had hoped would be a perfect evening. As dinner progressed, I began noticing subtle patterns that made my stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. Every conversation about my career somehow circled back to David's potential and prospects. When my colleague Michael mentioned the $2 million campaign I had successfully managed last quarter, Dad immediately shifted the discussion to ask about opportunities for young men in the corporate world. My mentor Sarah shared stories about my leadership skills and innovative thinking, describing how I had transformed our team's approach to client relations. Dad listened politely, but responded by noting that David has always been a natural leader too. He just needs the right environment to show what he can do. The deflections felt systematic and deliberate. When another colleague praised my ability to handle pressure during crisis situations, Dad mused that David would probably handle that kind of pressure even better. He has got those natural instincts that you cannot teach in business school. Each compliment directed toward me was immediately redirected toward David's theoretical abilities and untapped potential. Mom tried to balance the conversations, asking thoughtful questions about my new responsibilities and expressing genuine interest in my team management challenges. But Dad's comments grew more pointed as the evening wore on, each one designed to diminish my achievements while elevating David's imaginary capabilities. The wine was making Dad more talkative, and his observations about success became increasingly loaded with implications. He spoke about different types of intelligence and the difference between book smarts and street smarts in ways that felt specifically aimed at contrasting my academic approach with David's supposed practical wisdom. These moments triggered memories of similar conversations throughout my adult life. 2 years earlier, when I had called to share news of my first major promotion, Dad had responded by noting that David is just taking his time, finding the right opportunity. Not everyone needs to rush into the corporate rat race, like it is some kind of competition. When I had saved enough money to buy my own condominium, a modest but beautiful space that represented years of careful budgeting and sacrifice, Dad had commented that David is smarter about money saving by staying home instead of throwing cash away on property taxes and maintenance fees that someone else could handle. Last Thanksgiving, when I had announced my salary increase and bonus, David had grown sulky and withdrawn from the dinner table. Dad had spent the rest of the evening discussing different definitions of success and wondering aloud whether making lots of money was really the best measure of a person's worth. Mom had later called to tell me that Dad thought David might go back to school for a business degree, as if this possibility somehow balanced the scales of our respective accomplishments. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. My success was consistently framed as either fortunate timing, corporate politics, or somehow less meaningful than David's potential achievements. No matter how hard I worked or how much I accomplished, the narrative in our family positioned me as someone who had gotten ahead through luck, while David represented authentic talent waiting for recognition. As the evening at Romano's continued, David became increasingly withdrawn from conversations about my career. He made sarcastic comments under his breath about people who know how to play the corporate game and networking versus real work. When Sarah asked him about his own job plans, he shrugged and muttered something about retail being honest work that does not require kissing up to bosses. Dad's voice grew louder as he consumed more wine, his comments about what real success looks like, becoming less subtle and more pointed. Other guests began glancing at each other with uncomfortable expressions, clearly sensing the tension that was building beneath the surface of what should have been a celebration. I found myself trying repeatedly to redirect conversations toward neutral topics, suggesting toasts to family support and everyone's different paths in life. But Dad seemed determined to make some point about earned versus unearned success, his words carrying an edge that made the elegant dining room feel smaller and more claustrophobic with each passing minute. Sarah, ever perceptive, leaned over to whisper words of encouragement, reminding me that my achievements were real, regardless of anyone else's inability to acknowledge them. But I could feel my carefully planned celebration slipping away from me, transforming into something that felt more like a trial than a triumph. The room's temperature seemed to drop as our family dynamics shifted from celebration to judgment, and I realized that this might not be the validation moment I had hoped for. Instead, it was beginning to feel like another opportunity for me to be diminished in favor of David's theoretical greatness. The moment I had been dreading and anticipating arrived when Dad stood up, wine glass in hand, commanding the attention of everyone in the private dining room. The conversations died away as guests turned expectantly toward him, assuming they were about to hear a proud father's tribute to his daughter's achievements. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him clear his throat and assume the confident posture of someone preparing to make an important speech. This was supposed to be my moment of recognition, the validation I had been seeking my entire adult life. I want to say something about success and what it really means. Dad began, his voice carrying clearly throughout the restaurant. The words sounded ominous rather than celebratory, but I held on to hope that he was building towards something positive. Some people work hard their whole lives, and others just get opportunities handed to them on a silver platter. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing on me. There is a big difference between earning something and just being in the right place at the right time. My stomach began churning as I realized where this speech was headed, but I could not quite believe he would actually say what I feared was coming next. "Melissa, you did not really deserve this success," Dad announced to the stunned room. "Your brother David, now he has got natural talent that companies should be fighting over. Real leadership ability that comes from the inside, not from kissing up to the right people." The silence that followed was so complete. I could hear the soft jazz music playing in the background and the distant clatter of dishes from the main dining room. Guests stared in shock, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright horror at what they had just witnessed. But Dad was not finished. "David just needs the right chance to show what he can do, while some people," he paused to glance directly at me, "get promoted because companies need diverse faces in management positions to look good for their shareholders." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable confirming every fear I had carried about my place in our family hierarchy. Years of feeling invisible and undervalued suddenly crystallized into this moment of public humiliation, delivered by the person whose approval I had spent decades trying to earn. The room felt frozen in time as everyone waited to see how I would respond to this devastating attack on my character and achievements. My colleagues looked mortified. Sarah's face was flushed with anger on my behalf, and even David seemed surprised by the harshness of Dad's words. But something unexpected happened in that moment of crisis. Instead of crumbling under the weight of his dismissal, I felt a strange sense of clarity and strength rising from somewhere deep inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate, but it was accompanied by a fierce determination to respond with dignity rather than devastation. I stood slowly, my hands surprisingly steady, despite the emotional earthquake happening inside my chest. A smile spread across my face, genuine and confident in a way that surprised everyone in the room, including myself. "You know what, Dad? That is absolutely fascinating perspective." I said, my voice clear and strong as I raised my own wine glass high. The room hung on every word, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Since David apparently deserves all this success more than I do," I paused for effect, my smile widening, as the full implication of what I was about to say became clear in my mind. "Cool. Then he can pay your bills too." The room erupted into murmurs and gasps as the implications of my statement registered with everyone present. Dad's face drained of color as he realized what I had just revealed, and David suddenly looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. "Because starting tomorrow," I continued with perfect composure, "the daughter who does not deserve her success will not be covering your mortgage payments anymore." The truth I had never shared publicly was now laid bare for everyone to understand. For the past 2 years, I had been quietly helping my parents with their monthly $1,500 mortgage payment, along with Dad's truck payment insurance and various emergency expenses that seemed to arise with suspicious regularity. My total monthly support to my parents amounted to approximately $4,000 money that came directly from the undeserved salary that Dad had just publicly dismissed as the result of corporate favoritism and lucky timing. "David can take over all those payments along with all the success he deserves," I added with a sweet smile that felt absolutely liberating. "I am sure his natural talent will figure out exactly how to cover everything." Dad began stammering something about not meaning it that way and just trying to motivate both of you. But his words sounded hollow and desperate in the face of the financial reality he was suddenly confronting. I gathered my purse and coat with deliberate calm, my dignity completely intact despite the emotional carnage surrounding me. My colleagues watched in admiration as I prepared to leave, and Sarah gave me an encouraging nod that conveyed both support and respect for how I had handled this impossible situation. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said to my guests, my voice warm and grateful. This has been absolutely enlightening in ways I never expected. As I walked toward the exit, leaving my stunned family and impressed colleagues behind, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete freedom from the need for approval from people who were incapable of seeing my worth. The aftermath of that evening unfolded exactly as I had expected it would. My phone buzzed relentlessly the next morning, with 17 missed calls from Dad and 12 increasingly frantic text messages begging me to reconsider and talk through what had happened. Dad's messages revealed the true extent of his panic as the financial implications of my decision became clear. "We cannot afford the house payments without your help," appeared in various forms throughout his texts, along with promises that he had not meant his words the way they sounded, and pleading requests for a chance to explain himself. The reality was stark and immediate. Dad had become dependent on my financial support in ways he had never acknowledged or appreciated. Without my monthly contributions, my parents faced the genuine possibility of losing their home, and David was completely unprepared to step into the role of family provider with his part-time retail income. When Dad showed up at my office 3 days later, building security had to escort him out after he became argumentative with the receptionist and demanded to see me immediately. His desperation was evident, but I remained firm in my decision. Actions have consequences, and words have the power to destroy relationships that took decades to build. Mom called crying later that week, caught between her husband's stubborn pride and the harsh financial reality they were facing. She admitted that she had watched the favoritism toward David for years, but had never found the courage to speak up about how unfairly I was being treated. My colleagues at work expressed genuine admiration for how I had handled the situation. Several shared their own stories of family dynamics that undervalued their achievements, and Sarah, my mentor, told me she had never been prouder of someone's ability to stand up for themselves with such grace under pressure. 3 weeks after the dinner, Dad swallowed his considerable pride and requested a serious conversation on neutral ground. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and I was shocked by how much he seemed to have aged in such a short time. The stress of potentially losing the house and facing David's inability to provide meaningful financial support had clearly taken its toll. For the first time in my memory, Dad admitted that my success had always made him feel threatened and inadequate as a provider. He confessed that watching me surpass his own achievements had triggered insecurities about his worth as a father and his ability to guide his children toward meaningful lives. His favoritism toward David, he explained, had been rooted in the belief that sons should be the primary achievers in families, and that my success somehow diminished David's potential rather than inspiring it. The admission was painful but necessary, and I could see that he was beginning to understand how deeply his attitudes had wounded me over the years. David was forced to confront adult responsibilities for the first time in his life. He found a full-time position at a local warehouse work that was physically demanding and far less flexible than his previous retail job. The experience of contributing to household expenses and helping cover the bills I had previously handled gave him insight into the real cost of the lifestyle he had taken for granted. Dad began attending therapy sessions to address his issues with gender roles, traditional family structures, and his own feelings of inadequacy as a provider. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but it represented the first genuine effort he had ever made to examine his attitudes and their impact on our family relationships. Mom found her voice in ways that surprised all of us. She began speaking up about the years she had spent watching David receive preferential treatment while I was consistently undervalued and overlooked. Her support meant more to me than she probably realized, and it helped create space for more honest conversations about our family patterns. The healing process was gradual and required patience from everyone involved. I maintained firm boundaries about financial support while slowly allowing opportunities for rebuilding trust and communication. Forgiveness, I learned, did not require me to pretend that the hurt had never happened or to immediately return to old patterns that had caused so much damage. Through therapy and honest reflection, I discovered strength I had not known I possessed. I realized that I had been seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it, not because they did not love me, but because their own limitations prevented them from seeing my worth clearly. I began developing deeper friendships with colleagues who had witnessed my work ethic and appreciated my contributions from the beginning. These relationships taught me what it felt like to be valued for my authentic self rather than constantly measured against someone else's potential. My dating life improved dramatically when I stopped gravitating toward people who needed me to prove my worth and started attracting partners who appreciated my ambition and independence as positive qualities rather than threats to their ego. The experience taught me that setting boundaries is not cruel or selfish, but necessary for maintaining healthy relationships with people who struggle to respect limits on their own. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is show them consequences because that is often how genuine growth and change begin. Success that you have earned through your own effort and determination needs no one else's permission to be valid or meaningful. The opinions of people who refuse to acknowledge your achievements say more about their character than yours, and seeking approval from those sources is ultimately a waste of emotional energy that could be better invested in relationships that nurture rather than diminish your sense of self-worth. Sometimes the people closest to us cannot see our value because it threatens their own insecurities about their place in the world. But that is their limitation to overcome, not our responsibility to manage by making ourselves smaller or less successful to accommodate their discomfort. Real strength comes not from seeking approval from those who withhold it, but from knowing your own worth and protecting it even when doing so means walking away from people you love. And sometimes the most profound act of self-respect is refusing to subsidize the very people who refuse to respect what you have accomplished through your own hard work and dedication. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family approval and self-respect? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their success is valid, regardless of who chooses to acknowledge it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be celebrated for your achievements, not diminished because of someone else's insecurities. Keep standing tall and honoring the work you have put in to get where you are today.